Here's what you missed this week on The Uncommon Good with Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. The Uncommon Good is on the air. I'm Bo Bonner. Bud Marr is with me in spirit. He will be with me here very shortly on voice. You'll hear it in a second. This is The Uncommon Good on Iowa Catholic Radio. So happy to have you with us. Thank you, Imogene Ingredients, for underwriting our show. So we have a fun one for you today. Bud and I had the chance to give a talk to the young adults, the Young Catholic Adult Association here in Des Moines, Iowa. The Diocese of Des Moines, they have events where they ask people like Bud and I to give talks about virtues and how that can be practically manifested, not only in personal life, but in the life of business. And so Bud and I got the chance to do that, and we talked about fortitude and temperance, two wonderful virtues, if you ask me. So we had the chance to talk about that with a group. Over 60 people were there. It was a wonderful time. We want to say thank you for being invited, and particularly all the people who thought about us and then had such wonderful questions and interactions afterwards. So coming up here, you'll hear Bud and I, one after the other. First segment will be Bud. Second segment will be myself. This was earlier this week, July 9th, on the Thursday. And so again, we got the chance to speak with the Des Moines young adult folks, talking about the virtues, fortitude, and temperance, and it was a wonderful occasion to get the chance to do that. So this is The Uncommon Good, going a little bit different from, I know we've been doing a series, but we just thought that it'd be a happy circumstance to get to do this. So we'll sound a little bit different because we recorded this live, but we want to say thank you to everybody involved who asked us to do so, and one more time, thank you, Imogene Ingredients, for underwriting the show and making this possible. This is The Uncommon Good. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to The Uncommon Good on Iowa Catholic Radio. This is a special episode where we'll be playing a live broadcast of a talk Bud and I gave. We want to say thank you to the Catholic young adults of the Des Moines Diocese who gave us the opportunity. We're speaking about fortitude and temperance and how that might be the case, that we can make that practical in our daily lives and our business lives. Bud is up first talking about temperance. I talk about fortitude. It's a great time. Thank you for tuning in.
Okay, hello everybody. This is such a full room. This is so awesome. Standing room only. Come on, let's go. Claps for that. Yeah, we had to get up more chairs than last week. So for those of you who haven't been before, this is only the second one that we've done in a break. We've had a break, and then we did one in June, and now we're back in July, and this is far more full than it was in June, so this is fantastic. Tonight we are joined by Bo Bonner and Dr. Bud Marr. They have a radio show together called The Uncommon Good. They actually met while they were in graduate school at Duke, both studying to be Protestant pastors, and now they're both Catholic. So we love that. Yeah, cheers for that. Come on. All right, so they're going to be joining us tonight to talk about the virtues of justice, fortitude, temperance, and prudence. And we're going to hear from one of them, and then they're going to tap out, and then they're going to have the other one talk. So we're really excited to have both of them here tonight, and we know that you guys will give them your full attention. So thank you guys for being here.
Well, thank you for having us. To prove that I'm the oldest man in the room, I'm going to use reading glasses. And I have to tell you, when you get to your late 40s and you start going to like church coffee hour and you realize you're no longer the young person, it is a life adjustment. So I'm going through that these days. But we're so grateful for the invite. I like the energy in the room. When Bo and I were sorting out this conversation, it was funny because we were sort of like, well, what do you want to focus on? What do you want to focus on? And the lot fell to me to cover fortitude, not fortitude. What am I covering?
Any of them.
Okay, I'm actually doing temperance. That was a brain freeze. I'm doing temperance, and as you can probably tell, it's been a growth point for me in my spiritual life, and so I'm sort of like trying to lean into temperance better. But I think God has a funny way of doing these things with us, where sometimes these sorts of talks can be a challenge for us as well, like a point of conviction. And God, of course, uses, imperfect vessels to get truth to others as well. Like it was mentioned, Bo and I met in graduate school. How many years ago is that now?
23.
Long time ago. And a little tidbit, since I'm talking on temperance, Bo will sometimes mention in conversations that like he didn't have a drink until he met me. And when he just, without a lot of context, that sounds kind of terrible. But I guess it's true. Varsity Ale House back in Durham, North Carolina.
Red Stripe.
Yeah, that's right.
Jamaican for beer.
He had an alley-oop, which it was like Blue Moon followed by Dr. Pepper, which sounds weird, but it's actually quite good. In the preparation for this evening, we sort of asked, like, what's the ground level? Because I know Father Epstein gave a talk last month, but just out of curiosity, how many folks in the room were here last month? Okay. So a large portion of the room. If you weren't here last month, don't sweat it. We're not taking attendance. But I was just like, how much of the foundation should we set in place? And we were kind of talking about that. But I'll sort of gesture to some like key, just fundamental points about virtue. If I'm being too basic, like somebody send me a signal that's, this is like, let's move on to some deeper waters. I came to virtue theory late in life because I grew up in a Bible church, and in evangelical Bible churches, it's just not so much a thing. So for them, it's very much, what does the Bible say? And the Bible is supposed to settle any sort of like disputes about morality and things like that. And so for us, ethics was kind of boiled down to scripture. And it's weird to think about now, but there are huge moral questions that were almost left unaddressed. Like, to get nitty gritty, this isn't sex talk this evening, but when Rachel and I were going through marriage preparation, we received zero guidance about contraception. And for the Bible church that we went to, serious Christians, very dedicated individuals, it was sort of a moot point. Like we, in some ways, like the first 5 years of our marriage, like I lacked culpability because it wasn't a question. But in the Catholic world, hopefully we all know by this point in life that virtue theory is like a key part of our entire tradition. So most important theologian in the West, St. Thomas Aquinas. He, of course, maybe that's disputed in here, I don't know. Someone shouts like, Karl Rahner. No, it was Aquinas. And Aquinas was channeling very much Aristotle, right? And for Aristotle, virtues were central to the moral life. And, from Aquinas' perspective, grace builds on nature. So when he comes to talk about ethics, it's not simply what Scripture says, however important that is, but it's this whole understanding of the human person. Unfortunately, in our culture, that's almost been entirely lost, right? There's a famous thinker at Notre Dame who recently passed, one of my favorite recent thinkers, Alistair MacIntyre, and he's got an entire book called After Virtue. So he sort of describes reality, trying to navigate this complex world without any understandings of the virtues. And he sort of like, the book starts with this analogy of kind of like if we lost all of the scientific textbooks and we tried to reconstruct science from the ground up, from just like little tidbits of parchment here and there, what would that look like? And that's what we're kind of going through with the moral life. What's refreshing, or what's kind of like, where we say in the business world, like our threats are also our opportunities. Our opportunity here is that Bo and I have found as we teach undergraduates that Aquinas' understanding of the virtues, channeling Aristotle, really resonates with a lot of kids. And I'll say kids, with a lot of students, right? Young people. It's because in this world, I think because of that sort of vacuum that's been created by a loss of the understanding of the virtues, what we tend to opt for societally is an ethics of law, right? Like if we don't have this understanding of the human person who's growing into a person of character, then what sort of like can put boundaries around human behavior is the strictures of a legal code. And if you think today, even from now, as opposed to when you were like 5 years old, how many more cameras are in your life? Whether that's a Ring camera or when you go shopping, wherever it happens to be. Nothing is new under the sun. All of this goes back to like the great thinkers of the ancient world thought about all of this. Some of you might be familiar with Plato's Republic, or if not Plato's Republic, in The Lord of the Rings with the ring that Frodo puts on. Tolkien was drawing upon Plato, and in the Republic, there's this whole parable of a shepherd who finds a ring, and the ring allows him to be invisible. And once he puts on the ring, He seduces the queen, he kills the king, and he sets himself up in power. And this parable is presented by a figure named Glaucon, who's kind of challenging Plato. And the challenge is basically, why do human beings act rightly? Like, why do they make moral choices? And the worldview that Glaucon is presenting is that we only do what's right to avoid punishment. Like, we know that if we violate the codes of human society, that we're going to get in trouble. But if we had the opportunity to be invisible, if we could get away with things, then we would certainly jump at that opportunity. A pretty, sort of like a kind of a dark worldview at the end of the day. And a lot of modern thinkers like Thomas Hobbes have fallen into that sort of trap. Well, all of this ties into temperance, and I'll use alcohol as sort of like the focal point because it's an easy way to get into this question. We see this with the use of alcohol. So if you think about like college freshmen, basically their freshman year is their access to the ring of Gyges. All of a sudden, they have this environment that they're thrust into, and there's laws on the books about not drinking underage, but in some ways it's just sort of not enforced on most campuses. And the idea is like once they're thrust into that environment, with those strictures thrown off and the threat no longer in place, they're going to do what they want. And so for us, as we think about the good things God has given us, the question is, how do we live in the world in such a way that we witness to the reality of who we are as members of the body of Christ? And that gets back to this question of like, let's approach this not as the ethics of law, which I think has a lot of limitations, but as the ethics of desire. Why do I do the things that I do? And if you've read Aristotle at any point in your life, you know that he's a great philosopher in the sense like he's got the same skills that my 4-year-old does. He's always asking the why question. So why did I get up today and go to school? Well, to get an education. Why do you want an education? Because one day I want to have a good job. Why do you want a good job? What sort of answers do people give? Money. That's kind of the underlying factor for a lot of people. And why do you want that money? So you can take the trips that you want. You can date the person that you want. You can have the apartment that you want. But as you keep posing those why questions over and over, be like that toddler. Aristotle says foundationally, at the end of the day, what we're all seeking is happiness. C.S. Lewis kind of channeled this idea. I mean, it's a quote that's always stuck out to me. He says, even the man who's entering the brothel is seeking his own good, right? There are all sorts of activities that lead to dissipation. Even the person who's at the darkest moment in their life and they're considering suicide, in their mind at that moment, it's a good. It's the only good that they see available to themselves. So with drinking alcohol, one of God's gifts to us, I think the question is worth asking, why do we do so? Some people say because of how it tastes. I don't know, that seems like a stretch to me. I mean, I like Confluence. Proud member of St. Augustine's, the owner of Confluence. But I don't know. If it didn't have any mind-altering effects, would we still drink Budweiser? Bad example. Others will say maybe for health reasons. Again, probably a stretch. Science seems to indicate otherwise. I had a relative, an aunt, who drank like a glass of red wine every night, and she did live to be 90, but I don't know about the correlation there. So why do we drink? And I think that's a question worth asking, because what it sort of drills down to is, if we think about the intention of why we enjoy good things and then the object, like our actual activity, do the two match up? So if someone says, I drink to enjoy the company of other people, but at their Thanksgiving family gathering, the drinking always leads to big family fights or whatever, there's a disconnect happening there. There's, X and Y are not following. If we say, I drink to relax, but end up hungover and exhausted the next day, all of a sudden there's, we can begin to ask, is our intention matching the object of our activity? Now, I do have to add one proviso. I feel like if I ever give talks on temperance, there is a place in life to say, I'm not going to touch a drop of it, right? And alcoholism, I should say, is a serious issue. And so there are, for some of us, that's the pathway to follow. But I think for others, getting back to asking why we drink, and then asking this question about, is there a deficiency? And if there is that sort of deficiency where I'm either reckless in my drinking or I have a sort of Manichaeism outlook on the good things of this world, then finding a different path. In terms of the different path, what I want to suggest this evening is a set of ideas that I'm basically stealing from someone. So stealing is a topic down the road or whatnot. But we did have a professor in graduate school who told us, like, if you think you had an original idea, you just forgot where you read it. So I'll just be upfront. This is Alexander Schmemann. He's an Orthodox theologian. He wrote a wonderful book called For the Life of the World. And what Schmemann gets to at the start of this book is he says, the skeptical philosopher Feuerbach was right. So Feuerbach said, you are what you eat. And in his mind, for Feuerbach saying you are what you eat, he was saying, I'm sort of bracketing all these sort of like speculative metaphysical questions that have burdened philosophers, and I'm just going to get to the core issue of life. You are what you eat. More and more these days, with sort of like the way we think about health, we know that very much to be the case. But Alexander Schmemann says Feuerbach unwittingly hit on a really important theological point. So as human beings, we fell through our eating, and we're saved through our eating, right? It was through partaking of a fruit that was forbidden to them that Adam and Eve brought sin into the world. And then what's the central act of the Catholic faith? The Eucharist. And for Schmemann, that has all sorts of implications. His book is really a kind of like slow unfolding of this idea, and it's wonderful. You think about the phrase in the New Testament that we're a kingdom of priests. You ever think about what that fully means? Like when we think of priests, what comes to mind is Father Epstein, Father Pishu, right? Father PJ. But St. Peter, when he calls the church a kingdom of priests, he's saying in effect that you and I are priests as well. So what does that look like? What is priesthood? And that draws us back to the very first pages of Scripture where Adam and Eve are placed in a garden. They're given the good things of this world as blessings, but are they meant to just sit on those blessings, right? I mean, part of Adam's issue is not simply the action that he takes, but the apathy that he shows. He's called to be a priest, a mediator to all creation. And that doesn't involve simply naming the animals, but to take the good things of this world and to offer them up in adoration to God. Human beings, as St. Paul says, like we're temples of the Holy Spirit. We're the nexus where heaven and earth meet. And so our role, our fundamental identity is to show the divine to the world. The glory of God is the human being fully alive, as St. Irenaeus said. And so that sort of transforms the way that we think about eating and drinking. Obviously, just to be focused on satiating ourselves, like to fall into gluttony. By the way, you made it really easy for me not to be gluttonous this evening. So I was a latecomer and the pizza was gone when I arrived, but this is better. I loaded up on the veggies and fruits. But to satiate ourselves, to be gluttonous, that's one extreme. That's the wrong direction. But in another way, and I think this is as much of a temptation in our context, to look at the goods of the world as something to be avoided or shunned is just as much of an error. I already mentioned growing up in a Bible church. My brothers and I joke that, like, for us in Sunday school, like, the Christian life was boiled down to don't drink, smoke, or chew, or go with girls who do. But there was this kind of Puritanism, right? But as Catholics, we will enjoy a good beer. Even when we fast, it's not giving up something that's negative. It's recognizing the goodness of something and then entering into a sort of like deprivation or asceticism for the sake of growing closer to God. And that's where, when I think about, like, if we want to talk about takeaways this evening, because I know it's been sort of abstract theology so far, I think we should get creative in how we think about these things. Like, for some of us, maybe part of our spiritual life can say, even though this is a good thing for me, I am going to abstain, but I'm not going to abstain because, alcohol is evil or something like this. I'm going to make reparation for the drunkenness that is out there. I think home brewing can be a creative way to think about this, because what home brewing does is it slows us down, right? These days, my blood pressure has been kind of high, so I've been working on it. And one step that I've taken recently is I practice intermittent fasting. So again, I'm no paragon of fitness, but I'll try to stop eating at like 7 p.m. and not begin eating until 2 p.m. the next day. And I've had mixed results. Like, I'm not super fit yet. It has helped my blood pressure a little bit. But the key for me in that practice is that I'm actually more mindful when I eat. Because when I go from 7 p.m. to 2 p.m. the next day, like if I would just go back like pizza, cake, right? It sort of undoes all that I've been working on for the last few hours. And so I think the mindset that we want to have, the vision in front of us, is, again, it gets back not to just sort of like any sort of strict rule that we want to follow. It's how do we model the divine? Not model's the right word. How do we manifest the divine in the world? If you and I are called to be not like Christ, but to be truly like little Christ, to be deified, then even our eating and drinking, or especially our eating and drinking, should be one way that we witness to what God has done in our lives. I think that starts at the dinner table. It ends, it really begins and ends with the Eucharist. And so, especially in your receiving the body and blood of Christ this weekend, hopefully it will call to mind some of the little tidbits that I was able to share this evening. And I think with that, turn it over to Bo.
Thank you, Bud. One of the things he doesn't talk about is that when we were at Duke together, one of the things that might have started the drinking or almost drinking, Oklahoma State was actually in the Final Four that year. And Duke was on the other side of the bracket. And God knew that I wouldn't be able to handle it. So we lost to Georgia Tech. And Duke lost to UConn and Emeka Okafor. None of you know what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to be old. So one of the things that if you saw, like we didn't have like a poster or anything because who wants that? But it would be funny to advertise, we're going to be practical about temperance and fortitude. And anything about where I'm supposed to be practical is already a joke, right? You're like, oh, the philosophy major is going to be practical. Thanks. What do you do for a job? Oh, I'm on the radio. That's like saying, like, I'm a vintage clown, right? So to talk to a bunch of young people that have real jobs is sort of hilarious up here, because I did a lot of my work trying not to have a real job. So I'm probably not practical. Definitely not temperate, just by eyesight. I found out, so one of the sort of sub-virtues, so every virtue is a cardinal virtue that we're going over, and then there's sub-virtues. In the same way, there's capital vices, and then there's vices attached to those vices. So one of the sub-vices that really hurt was one classically was called voluptuousness. And I was like, geez, Thomas Aquinas, thanks for making something that's aimed right at Bo Bonner. Maybe, I don't know if people think I look naturally fortitude. I know I start a lot of fights. I start a lot of arguments. I never really finished them. So I don't know if I'm sort of this naturally courageous guy. I will say where courage mostly comes up is I did marry an introvert, so that's courageous. And I'm also a teacher. And so to all the teachers out there, it takes a lot of courage to want to form the nation's children. So maybe that's where I can say, okay, maybe I have a little bit of courage to say. Welcome back to The Uncommon Good on Iowa Catholic Radio. This is a special episode where we'll be playing a live broadcast of a talk Bud and I gave We want to say thank you to the Catholic young adults of the Des Moines Diocese who gave us the opportunity. We're speaking about fortitude and temperance and how that might be the case that we can make that practical in our daily lives and our business lives. I talk about fortitude. It's a great time. Thank you for tuning in. My idea here, though, and this is what I'm always trying to do, is not try to act like I have this sort of one-to-one advice for you. I actually would probably learn more about business and working in the working world by listening to all of you. The job of the philosopher is to try to make what's ordinary strange. I'm a strange guy. So I'm going to try to do this. I'm trying to make fortitude and courage strange and add a little bit of strangeness about temperance as well. So one of the ways that I'm going to do that, the aforementioned lesser virtues and vices attached to the cardinal virtues, I want to bring up a few of those that maybe gives us an idea about what goes into or what's the preconditions of something like fortitude and temperance. And then I'm going to try to talk about fortitude particularly, but temperance a bit too, maybe sort of in the exact opposite way that they usually get spoken of. So speaking of ripping people off, who I am plagiarizing is Father Pagui, who made a catechism of the Summa. It is very dorky and very dry. I'll try to make it at least a little bit fun. So fortitude, of course, and courage. The idea in virtue is a mean between two extremes, and I think Bud was getting at this very well. With fortitude, the idea is it modifies a passion so that it doesn't go one way or the other too much. It's a dorky way to say you can run afoul of the good by doing something too much or too little, and fortitude is very obviously one of the most easiest to derive. How do we deal with the passion of fear? Fear is actually a wonderful thing that God gave you. Have you ever met a little kid, you will notice their absolute lack of fear when appropriate. The fact that you have to do things like, hey, little Timmy, you shouldn't play in a highway. That's because they lack the requisite fear that God has put into their souls. Now, there's reasons for this, right? Human evolution has made it where even little kids would be afraid of changes in the weather, changes in perceptual vision. They hear a lion roar. The problem is when you're 2 years old, you can't see a 75-mile-per-hour car until it's much too late. So fear doesn't help. So then we have to install what you should be afraid of. And I know that sounds really weird, but one of the things your parents did, if they were nice, is make you properly afraid of things. Principally them, but also other things. And the idea is if you're appropriately afraid, good. You will no longer play on a highway, touch electricity, buy Bitcoin, whatever else, right? And the idea is if you're appropriately afraid, that this will guide you through life in so many ways. But the problem with all good things is if there's too much of it, it goes bad, which is essentially what Bud was talking about with temperance, or another way to say this, the life of Bo Bonner. So all good things can be done in excess. Fear is a good, but if you have it too much, something bad happens, which is called being a coward. Now, we kind of throw all sorts of opprobrium on this and just make it like it's a personality fault, but it needs to be much more brass tacks. You can't control yourself whether you feel fear or how much you do, right? So some of you almost died, and others of you are fine. And the fact of the matter is, you largely don't have a say about how you just reacted. Whether you reacted very strongly, and then how long you felt and how much you reacted. Fortitude is about what you do rationally once you have received that information. I should be afraid right now. It's easy to think about too much fear being the thing that makes it where I can no longer be rational. So what it means to be cowardly is to be so afraid that you can't think well. And the idea is, of course, that we then put all sorts of moral opprobrium on it. We talk about who's cowards or who's not. But that's the idea. In a similar way, you can actually not react to fear enough. We've all met the 19-year-old guy who has never snowboarded before, and they're like, let's start with the double black diamonds on a mountain. And you're like, you should be much more afraid, and then you never see them again. So you know how this goes, right? What's interesting about fortitude, and like with all of these things, right, is there's multiple, like I said, sub-virtues that are a part of this. And so you can start to think about bad things, for instance, right? So yes, cowardice is one. But then the other thing that we have to be worried about is something like presumption or ambition or vainglory. All of those which seem that they're about pride, but it's actually sort of not being afraid of circumstances in your life enough. But I don't want to focus on those necessarily. What I want to talk about is there's these sub-virtues. If you've ever heard of something like magnanimity, which is like great-souledness. I know, very weird, dorky topic. But this idea that it's a virtue to actually try to achieve great things. Now, we got to be careful here because you don't want to be vainglorious. You don't want to be presumptuous. You don't want to be too proud. But of course, this idea of wanting to do great things applies to people your age very specifically. You have your life in front of you. You are still skinny enough to be close to the microphone. Your knees don't hurt, right? So like this idea of magnanimity, of like that your life is before you and that there's things that you can do and that we've been called to great things, is precisely the sort of stuff that we try to whip into a frenzy in college, right? I've taught college for multiple decades, and beyond trying to teach you things, we're all trying to say, you can save the world, you can heal the world, it'll all be great. That was the plan up until your generation. In which case, when you went to college, we're like, by the way, the planet's toast, good luck. Also, economy, now a funny word. Remember when there was things called houses and you thought you'd buy one? Never mind, right? So we have done this really horrible trick to everyone your age, is what up until very recently was the biggest cheerleading racket on the planet, where we took people in their natural time, their natural hopes, their natural magnanimity. We have tried to beat that out of you. And precisely because people my generation and up have used too much, made bad plans, did things that don't work, all at the expense of future generations. And funny enough, for 2 straight decades, we kept talking about future generations will pay for this, future generations will pay for this. And now we're older and you're here, and we're all sort of offended that you guys have pointed out, you'll have to pay for this. And one of the things I've realized with Fortitude that we have not done you justice is we have made it sound like that there's a lack of hope and a lack of the future. The most depressing thing that I'll say to you tonight, and then I'll try to turn it around, is you can hear this somewhat in your music, really the music of the people just before you. I mean, I know that we get into fights like who's a millennial and who's Gen whatever, I forget. I mean, the idea is right, but the younger music, you will hear some of these worries about things like ecological disaster, climate change, apocalyptic aspects of civilization, the economy's crashing, all of these things. And you'll hear music like, what's the guy, Bo Burnham? I already make it sound old. I just remember him because he has my name too. And he has like some song that ends like, don't worry, like in a generation, this will all take care of itself. We won't be here. And what I've tried to convince people older than me is that's not despair. That's actually millennial and Gen Z hope. The best hope some people your age have is that it all ends at least. Because some of you know that this can be like the Sarlacc pit in Star Wars. Yeah, I went there. What happens in the Sarlacc pit in Star Wars? You're digested in the belly of the Sarlacc pit for 1,000 years. And I think some people know, and young people particularly notice, that things can be bad for centuries. You guys heard about the fall of the Roman Empire, right? How many years did that take? Conservative estimates, 400 years. That was perfect. 400 years of decline. And some people, I think, really do kind of hope that like whatever's happening with the super duper El Nino that's forming, that it just keeps forming. And then like the whole ocean boils and then we're all dead by 2040 and at least we can just get it over with. That's so much of what your generation has been told by precisely the old farts like me and older. and it's unjust. You, of course, if you want to have fortitude and if you want to have temperance, there is a theological virtue that if you don't undergird those two with it, you can't have fortitude and temperance. And that's actually hope. If you don't have hope, why be brave? If you don't have hope, why be temperate? But you have hope. You have hope. You have hope in multiple ways. Of course, temperance, undergirded by hope, is to say, the reason that I can have a light touch on the things of this world is because I know I have a claim to eternal things, that Jesus Christ himself has wrested out of the maw of hell from the devil, and nothing can take it away. Why can you, my friends, decide to hold lightly the things of this earth? Because your hopes don't stop or terminate with the life of this earth. Same thing with fortitude. Why can you be brave? Why, in the face of fear, do you not have to quake? Why is it that you can proceed rationally thinking and legitimately about the worries of this world? Because you know the victory has been won. There is no actual worry in the end. Jesus Christ, risen from the dead, has redeemed all things. You live in the world with the battle firmly won. It's just not the fourth quarter. We weirdly are in the third quarter. You know, the time when all the Iowa football teams start losing. You're punting right now. Anyway, okay, I won't get into the theology of punting. That's me. Where I think this comes to, and how I would put it this way. So, okay, in temperance, just to sort of give you the analog I'm trying to make, one of the sort of children of the vice of intemperance is actually incontinence. Yes, the thing that makes you pee your pants. So they'll talk about spiritual incontinence. So what is actual physical incontinence? It's when the muscles have become atrophied and weak, and you can't hold in what belongs inside, and you can't, choose when to let that stuff out. Spiritually, it is a similar analogy, except it's sort of in reverse. Incontinence is when the desires that Bud was pointing out, that you can't, as it were, regulate them because you don't have the spiritual muscle to regulate them and hold them in when you should. And so incontinence, to my mind, is best exemplified not by sex, not by alcohol. It's by the very design of the phones that you all use and how algorithms shape your life. Have you ever noticed that you'll spend hours doom scrolling and you're somehow tired afterwards? And you're like, how does that happen? I didn't do anything. The algorithm is designed to make you do 3,000 tiny acts of will every day. 3,000, 4,000, whatever it is. Every time you swipe, every time you look, you like. All of it's designed for you to do shallow movements of the will, none of them deep. And if you do 1,000 little movements, you'll be just as tired as 1 or 2 deep, like full movements of your body. Same thing happens with your will. You have in your pocket or in your purse right now a device tailor-made to make your spirit incontinent. In a similar way, when it comes to fortitude, one of the things that undermines this bravery, this magnanimity, this greatness of soul that you have been called to because you are children of God is called, funny word, I promise it's not made up by Bo, I'm saying it correctly, pusillanimity. The idea of it is contrary to the natural law, which inclines every act according to its capabilities. This is blameworthiness by not making use of the powers and means God has given to you. Not making use of the powers and means that God has given to you. So notice that it's not straight up cowardness, which would mean that when you feel fear, you don't think rationally. This sort of sub-sin is the idea of being worried about being great and not making use of the power and the means God has given you. Another way to say this is you've all been given great gifts, all of them from God, but also from your experience, from your life, from your parents, from your friends, from yourself. You all have great gifts. And pusillanimity is the vice of being too afraid to use them. Now, I know why people feel this way, and I know why people your age feel this way. One of them was the harangue I just went on. We have told you guys for most of your life that everything is worse than it used to be. And let me tell you about what the 1980s were like. Beyond being dangerous, and I will tell you, though, that everyone shoved into our heads that the world would be better every year after. And I mean, at stupid times. I mean, you guys are all probably thinking like, oh, I'm talking about the 90s. Bill Clinton, Smashing Pumpkins are playing. There's a computer. No, I'm talking about like 1986 when all of us had nuclear missiles like aimed at the whole world. But in the midst of being at the brink of assured mutual destruction, we still were told the world will be better when you're adults. Just survive the Ruskies shooting nukes and you'll be fine. In fact, you'll be better than fine. It will be a better world. And I'm not trying to say I am the last person to say optimism is good. I'm from Oklahoma. We're not optimists. I actually think healthy pessimism is good. But it is not fair to tell your age group at the precipice of the magnanimity growing in your soul, everything will be worse every additional year you're alive. And it's not fair because we have no clue, truly. And it's also unjust because when my generation and older does that, we're acting like it just happened and it's not our fault. The better way to say this is owning up and fessing. So I'm just talking about my generation. What we should say is we made mistakes. But what I want to tell you is the other way that you're tempted to be pusillanimous is to think that what you are doing isn't useful. And we live in a world dominated by, very dorky term, utilitarianism. We live in a world where you are evaluated if you are a useful cog in the machine. And you guys, especially if you're lucky to be from here or for loving Catholic families, there's all sorts of gloriously useless stuff that we spent all this time instilling in your souls. And of course, uselessness is actually the grand prize of every civilization. Taking you guys out of the workforce for 13 years, for 17 years, if it's grad school, 20, for some of you who need a little bit more time, 25 years. My point is we decided it was worthwhile to take you out of the workforce for decades. And you realize for the vast majority of all human history, that was never done. We have decided that it was better to make you useless for at least 13 years. And it should be the crown jewel of our civilization. In heaven, we should go around bragging to other people, yeah, our kids didn't do anything for decades because we created a society where something more important than use happened. But what do we tell you? What do we tell your generation? Oh, you better get a job that's useful. Oh, we need to decide to cut out degrees that don't get jobs, that don't have a purpose. What I want to tell you, though, is every useless part of you is actually the thing that matters most. We all know this. Your mom has like a pretty room you're not allowed in, and we're like, what are all these stopwatches for? They don't even work. And they're her prized possession. And if there was a fire, she wouldn't go get the toaster. She wouldn't go get like a broom. She wouldn't get all of the useful stuff because the useless things are the highest prize you can have. Your souls are useless to God. It's important you know this. God has no use for you because God doesn't need you, and that means that God can be completely for you. Do you think God sits upstairs in heaven, biting his nails, worried that if you don't do X, Y, or Z, he won't like win the deity championship or something? The glorious fact of our religion is you are useless to God. Because of that,
He came down and became a man and died for your sins and was resurrected because you are just a precious jewel to him. He didn't need you. He wanted you. In a world that goes around and acts like you are useless to them, bears down on your soul, and it can make you think, why even try using the gifts that I have? Why try using that which I've been given? Why make use of the powers and the means God has given me if the world is just going to end within 20 years and the world's already cast me aside as useless? Is it this idea that everything is only if you can get a use out of it, only if it has something that immediately can be bought and sold, why do it? Friends, to have fortitude in this age is to have the magnanimity of soul to say whatever it is that God has put in my life, that God has put in my soul, I don't care if the world can't see it but anything as useless. I will have the courage to stand against everything they say. And I will make the small commitment in my life, even if no one else appreciates it. I will use the gifts that God has given me. I will use the means God has put in my hands. I will use the powers by which he has given me specifically and alone. And if I have to work crummy jobs to make sure to have a place to eat and sleep and live so that I might do those things, so be it. But I will not let the world lull me into being anything other than courageous. You have to have hope. And I know that there's a lot of hope in this room. Because there's a lot of hope in this room, you can be temperate. You can be courageous. You don't have to be incontinent. You don't have to be pusillanimous. You can show the world, to put it as politely as possible, where it can go. Thank you.
All right, thank you both. That was so awesome. I think we can all say that we laughed a lot. That was really funny. So thank you for the fun tidbits in there.
Welcome back to The Uncommon Good. We got a chance to replay a live conversation Bud and I had with the Catholic young adults of Des Moines here on July 9th. We were talking about fortitude and temperance, trying to talk about the practicalities of that. How does that manifest in our life? And we were just so happy to be asked. If you happen to miss this playing on the weekend, you can, of course, go to iowacatholicradio.com, click on the podcast page, and easily be able to access that show, all of our shows, and all of our wonderful local shows. We want to say thank you to Imogene Ingredients for underwriting the show. It is exactly people, wonderful people like that, sponsors that make our show and all the local shows possible. Make sure to go to iowacatholicradio.com and go to our business sponsors page and make sure to give them a thank you for all that they do. Bud's always, of course, here at the end of the show, lets you know that you can be a part of the prayer life at Iowa Catholic Radio. You can go to iowacatholicradio.com again there to find out when not only our shows plays, but our opportunities to pray together. And I want to say, of course, this is your ministry as well. It's not just the people on the mics, behind the boards, or behind the desk. It's your ministry as well. You make it possible through your prayers, through offering your talents, but very much so through offering your donations. You go to iowacatholicradio.com and donate. You can call 515-223-1150 or text that same number, and people would love to get in touch with you to talk about ways that you can make Iowa Catholic Radio stay on the air. We've been at it for over 20 years, and we want to say thank you for all the people who make that possible. One more time, we want to give a shout out to everybody with the Catholic Young Adults here in Des Moines that gave Bud and I the opportunity to talk so that we could do, and then replay it for you to listen today. This is The Uncommon Good. May Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, reign in our hearts, family, city, state, nation, solar system, galaxy, the whole kit and caboodle. This is The Uncommon Good. We'll be back next week.